So another edition of the Heel to the Face podcast is on the air. He's Brandon. I'm Jared. We're coming off the Royal Rumble, but on the road to WrestleMania, we got a few stops, including Vengeance Day. Edge is going to take a detour. We'll talk about that. I personally thought Royal Rumble was the best WWE pay-per-view of all of 2021. What about you, Brandon?
Yeah, absolutely. It was the best. I absolutely enjoyed it. It was a great pay-per-view.
Got no other competition so far this year. Heel to Face podcast starts right now.
Fans celebrate with me from Rome to Rochester.
Bad Election would be my middle name. They might as well tag me up with my buddies from Syracuse.
So we're coming off of what was, without a doubt, the greatest, the best, the most watched, just in general, the all-around greatest WWE pay-per-view this entire calendar year of 2021. It doesn't have much competition, but so far, so good. It would have had competition years ago with New Year's Revolution, but those don't exist anymore. Yep. We went right to the Royal Rumble. Once again, he's Brandon, I'm Jared. This is the Heel to Face podcast. We're coming off the Royal Rumble. A pretty good Raw this week. Edge showing up on Raw, NXT. He's even going to show up on SmackDown. We'll see what happens there. And so much more to talk about, including a former WWE men's superstar now turning into a diva. Talk about that as well. But let's talk about the Royal Rumble to start things off and some of your takeaways, because it's funny, we were talking on Sunday, yes, and he had more negatives to say about the Royal Rumble than I did. I found zero negatives.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I just didn't. I did enjoy the Royal Rumble, the matches themselves. I thought they were pretty good. I'm glad that in some aspects we didn't have Ronda Rousey. We didn't have Goldberg in the Royal Rumble.
Now, why are you glad about Ronda Rousey? Goldberg, yes, but Ronda Rousey. Why no Ronda Rousey? Are you glad about that?
Because you know what? I want to save her for the big pop. You know, I really think she deserves the big pop. She is a mega star. I thought the women's Royal Rumble was better, honestly, than the men's. The men's was decent. I thought it was a decent Royal Rumble, but I think I was kind of surprised that Edge won. I picked Randy Orton. You know, we talked about that last week. He finished second. I just had a feeling that he was going to win, and he came up pretty close with the injury that he was out for most of the match. It was cool to see Edge run the gauntlet, so to speak. That was cool. But when I saw him, when I heard he was going one, I'm like, all right, I think we know what's going to happen here.
Now, see, personally, do you think that's a little overplayed, the whole coming out number one and winning the whole thing?
Yes.
First off, the person who comes out number two runs the whole thing as well. So if Randy Orton came out and won, he would have done the same thing outside of being out of the ring, mending to injuries for a little bit. But I don't want to tell you folks, but you know how one of reason number 645B that wrestling is scripted, because the number one person has won it more than the number 30th person, and the number two person also never seems to win, which is the exact same number as the number one person. Like it's the same thing, but it doesn't have that Paul, you say, je ne sais quoi, that pop to it.
Yeah.
It's like it's scripted, like it's staged that way. Because again, Randy Orton, Edge could have came out as number two, which he originally was scheduled to do, apparently, according to the pre-Royal Rumble shows, but they made him come out number one, and he won the whole thing, probably because they said, hey, he's winning the whole thing. Let's make him last the whole time and be number one, just for the sake of being number one.
I will say this. I do. The reason why I believe the women's Royal Rumble was much better was it was an unexpected winner, and they picked the right winner. And this is the first time, whether it's men's or women's Royal Rumble, that they actually got it right 100%. We both did not pick her because it was out of the blue, and we both know like WWE doesn't do what they usually should do. That's why we picked who we picked last week. But watching it and watching Bianca, the last, since she's been in NXT and all the way up to the call-ups, she's been fantastic. She's been great. I thought at the end of the match when she had that it was like a really real moment. Like she was like, you could, the emotions were there. And obviously she gave a shout out to her husband, which is Montez Ford of our boys there. What's their name?
Street Profits.
Street Profits. Thank you. I couldn't think of the name for a second, but I love Tez. I think he's great. But overall, that to me was the highlight of the night. I did enjoy some aspects of the Kevin Owens and Roman Reigns match, but to me, like, it was so predictable.
Now, see, here's what I mentioned to you, and this was probably my favorite part of that match. Okay, so they go backstage. That's been done before, but I think because they went backstage into a part of the Thunderdome, which is Tropicana Field in in Tampa, Florida, that we don't get to see, like the practice ring. There was a practice announce table back there. So it's a backstage that we're not used to seeing because it's a different backstage. It's not just the halls of the arena. And the fact that they went backstage and you could actually see, because that's the one thing with the Thunderdome, is that they've been dressing it up that you wouldn't know where it is. It's like a television studio. When you watch The Price is Right or The Tonight Show, you're not supposed to know what theater that is. It's supposed to be so jazzed up that it is the presentation of television. So for this to go off into the back of the Thunderdome and to see Tropicana Field, it brought back some nostalgia, brought me back to the good old days of early 2020, when you could actually tell, like when you're watching the Royal Rumble and it was at Minute Maid Park, you could see the Astros logo or something up in the corner, or when it's at Madison Square Garden, you can kind of see elements that make you realize it's Madison. Just in general, when you watch wrestling, you can see those arenas come through the television, whether it be Tampa this year, where they obviously are going to really show off the Buccaneers stuff going on at the stadium, whether it be the pirate ship and all the banners. So it brought me back to, even though there was no fans in the seats, I like seeing seats, and I like seeing the Tampa Rays logo and the cavernous too, because the Thunderdome makes it look like it's in a small arena. When they went from Orlando, they went to Tampa, and either way, it doesn't do justice to the size of the place they're in. So to show off that when they had the camera angles that they're in a stadium versus just a small arena, it kind of brought back some feels. I guess that's the best way to put it.
I'm going to add, to that, because I know obviously we got to see the whole venue in the Roman Reigns, Kevin Owens match. The takeaways that I had, it was a decent match, predictable. The problem I had was they literally, it's like they stole two elements from AEW's pay-per-views.
Yeah, it's the golf cart.
The golf cart and the forklift. If you remember the Matt Hardy spot that went not so well, that was involving the same spot that Kevin Owens did on Sunday night. So I noticed that it's like they're almost stealing some of the AEW stuff. So it kind of, to me, it took a little bit of the aura away from that.
I know AEW just did it, but again, in the world of wrestling, it's hard to not do something that someone else has already done.
But can you have done it like a year or two later? Not like the other day, literally it just happened within a few months. Why can't you wait and play it out? Because people see these things. Like it happened on AEW not really that long ago. So for me as a wrestling fan, why don't you could have done it in next year's Royal Rumble and people probably would have forgotten about it, to be honest with you.
That is true. I can't wait till we get to next year's Royal Rumble because hopefully it's in front of a crowd. But, and again, as much crap as I put on, it's the whole idea is it's not so much that it's not a crowd, it's the presentation. And the Royal Rumble was a good example of that because it had no crowd, just like WrestleMania had no crowd. And I'm perfectly fine with the Royal Rumble. You're not going to hear any complaints from me about the presentation or what it looked like or didn't feel like the Royal Rumble or they shouldn't call it. No, it was the Royal Rumble. WrestleMania? No. That didn't feel like WrestleMania. It shows, obviously, the fact that they're redoing it in a sense of the logo's the same. The Weekend, again, different song, but the same. And a lot of the similar, pretty much identical themes for WrestleMania are being redone this year for Tampa. But the Royal Rumble, no crowd. That sucks. But overall, that is a rewatchable pay-per-view. Yeah, it had the big pay-per-view feel. I agree with you there. I know we were talking about it on Sunday. We were texting back and forth with our former colleague on the program, Boy Green. So we were all going back and forth. And we all agreed. It was the presentation was fine considering there was no fans. Mm-hmm. I liked the one surprise that I really enjoyed was Carlito. We talked about that. Carlito looks fantastic. He's 41. He looks in the best shape of his life. I don't even think he looked like that back in the early 2000s. That's how Carlito hasn't looked that good, I don't think, ever. And he looked awesome. He's getting a special role now with WWE. He's getting like a tryout, but all reports are good that this tryout is going to turn into a full contract. And what we talked about in the last few days is this MVP 2.0, but better, because I think Carlito can go more than MVP at this point. I mean, MVP is doing pretty good as well. For sure. And when Carlito came back, obviously they made a big deal about what he looks like and how this isn't just, a one-off like the Litas of the world when they come through in the Women's Royal Rumble. Carlito's actually pushing for the return of another guy, a guy I saw back in the Elimination Chamber 2006 with Carlito in Albany, New York, and that's Chris Masters, apparently in the Qatar Professional Wrestling Affiliation or Federation or whatever happens in the Middle East. He's still a tag team champion with Chris Adonis, also known as Chris Masters. They are considered the Masters of Cool. So, and I tell you what, I saw Chris Masters in 2017 at the Impact Bound for Glory pay-per-view in Canada, and he still looks pretty good. Obviously he was in impeccable shape. I don't think he got out of that. I don't think it's been that long. I mean, we're talking, it's been 14 years, I guess. It's hard to believe.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, I could be completely wrong on this, but didn't he have issues with juice, so to speak? Didn't he have some issues with some performance-enhancing drugs?
You might be right, but I feel like Carlito want to be speaking on his behalf and tell him to bring him in if he didn't have the cleanliness to him. And it's funny you bring up how good Carlito looks, because this year, the 2020 Royal Rumble was the oldest Royal Rumble in wrestling history, only second to the 2019 or the 2020 Royal Rumble. It's hard to believe 2020 is not the current year we're in.
Yeah, I know, right?
So the 2020 Royal Rumble, the second oldest, now the oldest, the 2021 Royal Rumble. Only 2 people. And this kind of shows that you still got some stuff to do left in your life here. Yeah. Only 2 people under the age of 30. Dominic, 23, and Otis, 29. Everyone else over the age of 30.
barely.
And the winner, Edge, 47. So
he's knocking on 50. And speaking of Edge, obviously we're going to see a lot of good things. We're going to talk a lot about him in just a moment on the rest of the program. But I have to point out, he wants to tag with Ed or with Christian. So the ENC, the Edge and Christian, we could have that tag team back in the fold. I mean, Christian had a nice performance on the Royal Rumble as well. That was a good story. I mean, what are your thoughts on Edge and Christian? I want to get.
I think Edge and Christian would be a cool tag team for kind of like a greatest hits thing. But as for Edge actually being a full-time competitor is what he promises. The same thing Ronda Rousey promised, as she left after a year and hasn't been back since.
Yep.
But Edge, I think right now he's got to focus on being a singles competitor for the time being. He can do some one-offs with Christian for fun, but then making another run at the tag belts, I at least say after WrestleMania, because he's got a lot of stuff on his plate until then.
Yeah, I agree. I think after WrestleMania is a good time. I think right now they shouldn't. I think they should wait till maybe the Monday Night Raw after WrestleMania to maybe do something that might be cool. I'm really interested to see what's going to happen with Edge, and I know we're going to talk more about Edge in just a moment.
So we'll move on to that. And Brandon over here thinks that we're going to get the men's version of what we got last year with the women's version. And I have to disagree with you. He's got Edge and Finn Balor, and believe me, awesome match. Who wouldn't want to see that? Yeah. Probably more so than against Drew McIntyre. But this is WrestleMania. You got to go for the big pop. And I just feel you can't have Edge against Finn Balor of NXT. I understand that it elevates NXT, but I guess, it's
the best matchup. It's the best
matchup. And, and that is the good thing about the world we live in today in WWE, is that they can have, and this is what I was saying about Bianca Belair winning the Royal Rumble. Just because you have someone winning the Royal Rumble, you can have anybody, because you have so many matches on the card. You have so many championships to contend for. There's been so many times that the Royal Rumble winner has opened up the WrestleMania card against the champion of their choosing, because the other championship was a main event. So if you don't feel that Edge, or let's say Bianca Belair, is main event quality, you don't have to put her in the main event. You could put her in the SmackDown Women's Championship to lead off the show, and put the women's match you really want later on. So it kind of makes me feel like, obviously hindsight's 2020. It's too bad Kofi Kingston a couple years ago didn't win the Royal Rumble, because it would have been cool, because he ended up doing the same thing. He ended up going to WrestleMania, winning the championship. So if he would have actually won the Rumble at that time, it would have caught everyone off guard, because he is literally someone no one would predict at that time to win the Royal Rumble and the main event WrestleMania. But again, he went on to do the same thing. So Bianca Belair, even if you're saying, we don't think she can main event, but if you're even thinking about putting her in any one of the championship matches, she can win the Royal Rumble, and then you can still put your Charlottes there. So by Edge winning the Royal Rumble, I get it that, he can fight. If you don't want, Edge versus Drew, you still want Drew versus Goldberg, Brock Lesnar versus Rome, whatever have you with the big guys, you could have still had Edge win the Royal Rumble, because there's so many championships to contend for. But I feel Edge is too big of a name right now. And, it just doesn't sit right to me to do the NXT championship like that.
If a guy like Finn Balor or even Adam Cole were not the title holder, I'd agree with you 110%. But when you have a name like Finn Balor in particular, I mean, Adam Cole would be another great name. They're the flag bearer for what's considered the third brand. It's not the minor leagues. They don't even look at it like that anymore. It's the third brand, and they've been doing great things in NXT. And what better way to introduce more fans that are not really familiar with the NXT brand, because they're invested.
But that's the thing with WrestleMania. You're supposed to you get a lot of the fans who only tune in for WrestleMania, so they want to see the big names. They want to see the Andre versus Hogan, the Warrior versus Hogan, the Rock versus Austin. Here's the thing.
Balor's a familiar name. Balor was the Universal Champion.
Yes.
He's familiar. That's and I would tell you this. especially Finn Balor, because he was a Universal Champion. I don't see why that would be an issue. I think that would be great for not only for WWE as a whole, but taking it piece by piece. I think NXT would benefit fantastic from it because you're getting the edge rub, so to speak. I use the word rub, but the edge rub would be fantastic. And having Edge and Finn, which is one of those matches that who doesn't want to see? I think we all know that. We all want to see that match. Why not make it happen?
Here's what I've been reading, and here's what I think is more of a possibility. Because here's the thing about the Royal Rumble. It's not 1988. We got a lot of time to go to WrestleMania. Back in 1993, you probably only had a couple of Monday Night Raws, and they were an hour long apiece and no pay-per-views. So it's not like it is today where we have technically 3 pay-per-views. We got NXT Vengeance Day Takeover.
Great name.
Which is a good name. We'll talk about when, because one thing I brought up the other day on my Twitter account is, when can we drop the Takeover? Let's talk about that. When can we drop the Takeover?
Anytime now, because I thought NXT was considered the third brand. I thought WWE considered NXT the third brand.
I mean, think about it. It was like In Your House 20 something where we turned it from In Your House, like D-Generation X, to then we turned it into, I think, No Way Out, In Your House. And then it was just a couple months later, we dropped it entirely. It just went away. The In Your House, and then the names were the names. And I think we're at a point now where, we don't have to have everything Takeover. I don't really understand how we needed to have Takeover as long as we did. Names can be names. What's the Takeover thing?
Yeah, I think honestly,
NXT Vengeance is fine. NXT Vengeance Day. That's fine.
Yeah,
we don't need the Takeover.
I don't
aspect.
mind. I don't mind that. I mean, honestly, I think what NXT should be doing and keep doing at least is use these old '90s Attitude Era pay-per-views that have been retired. Bring them back. Bring them back to their old glory because there's some great ones out there that
we could have had NXT In Your House without Takeover. NXT Great American Bash without Takeover, which I don't think it did actually. I think Great American Bash they used on a TV show. But,
yeah, I think so.
So exactly, they didn't have Takeover, and it works just fine. Yeah. So moving back on though to Edge and the championship, I like Edge and Finn Balor. Don't get me wrong, but I just can't see that happening. So what I've been reading and what I think is probably more of a realistic option is Edge showing up in NXT at Vengeance Day, maybe taking on Karrion Kross and putting his number one opportunity on the line, losing to Karrion Kross then challenging Finn Balor to win the at WrestleMania or Takeover that weekend for the championship, which I feel there won't be a Takeover that weekend. I feel it'll be a part of WrestleMania.
Yeah.
And then Edge jumping in the Elimination Chamber, which probably will have a number one contender stipulation to it, jumping in the Elimination Chamber and getting back that number one contendership, then going after Roman or going after Drew. I just feel like Edge is just such a big name. He's such a star.
That's not a bad call. I won't disagree. I think if that were to happen, I'm not opposed to that. But again, personally, I think a lot of fans like myself want to see Finn versus Edge. But I'm okay with that. If you're going to throw Karrion Kross in, he's undefeated. He's never lost a match. Mm-hmm. So that could work.
That could mean. That with Pete Dunne and Finn Balor at the NXT pay-per-view.
That wouldn't be a bad match.
And then you obviously have another winner and match you set up for elimination. Because here's the thing. Elimination Chamber is one thing. But then we also got Fastlane. I don't know what they're going to do for Fastlane just 3 weeks before WrestleMania. They'll figure something out. We'll have a bunch of 6-man tags. They'll figure something out. But as of, it's just one of those, just floats out in the middle of nowhere. What are you doing with this 3-hour pay-per-view you want to put on 3 weeks before WrestleMania, in which is supposed to be 2 nights. So you're going to have a lot of matches for WrestleMania. So how are you not going to burn some of those at Fastlane? I don't know.
Yeah, but it'll be interesting.
We will figure it out as we move on to AEW and a big pop this week for the fans that were in attendance. Kenta from New Japan came out and attacked Jon Moxley. It was just about a week ago in New Japan, US, at one of the Strong shows that Jon Moxley attacked Kenta, better known to the WWE audience as Hideo Itami. But now we got a partnership. First we got Impact AEW, now New Japan AEW. Are you loving all this mix up?
I don't mind it because you know what? It makes the product even better and it makes it even more competitive against the flagship of sports entertainment that we know is WWE.
The one issue we got right now is that the only people that can kind of be a part of this are those who are already in the States, like Hideo Itami, because Jon Moxley can't go back over to Japan. Hideo Itami or Kota Ibushi or Jay White, if you're in Japan, it's kind of tough to go back and forth, that kind of thing.
Yeah, especially right now.
Yeah. So that's the issue that we have with doing this thing right now, but it all works in together. You got a Roku?
I do.
Okay, perfect. Because on February 11th, New Japan announced this morning that they got their show New Japan Wrestling Strong America or something. I think it's just called New Japan Wrestling. It's I think it's got the word strong in it somewhere, but it's February 11th. Every Tuesday, I believe, on Roku TV, a 1-hour show just for North America. So that means you're going to have your North American announcers. And hopefully, because it's for North America only, I don't know how they're going to do it, but if you watch Wrestle Kingdom, it's the North American announcers, but everything else is pretty Japanese.
Yeah.
This way, I wonder, if there's a way that they can do this to really Americanize it. When the wrestlers come out, we don't maybe have the American, Japanese, the weights, and different.
I don't mind it. I think
denominations there.
Doesn't. I mean, for me, it doesn't bother me. I think it actually makes it kind of cool because you can see both languages. I don't mind it.
Well, one person who might show up in New Japan Wrestling, or actually probably won't, because he's done with professional wrestling. That's at least what he's telling a lot of podcasters and people interviewing him. It's Lars Sullivan, recently released from the WWE, and he's only got good things to say. He says, his anxiety on the road, just him in general is not feeling being in WWE. They gave him a lot of chances. He didn't take them, and he's happy to be out, and he thinks he's done professional wrestling ever again. Are you fine with Lars Sullivan never wrestling? Would you like to see him again? Are you disappointed at all?
I mean, I'm only disappointed that, unfortunately his issues that he's been diagnosed with, unfortunately have taken a toll on his career. That's the downside, but on the bright side, if he's happy and he seems legitimately happy, I didn't see any of the podcasts or anything, but if he's at peace and he's happy and, maybe this will help his anxiety, more power to him. And you know what? I can't argue with it.
So March the 3rd, not at the pay-per-view Revolution, but on an episode of Dynamite, it's going to be Shaq and Jade Cargill versus Cody and Red Velvet. Do you like that being on Dynamite versus on the pay-per-view, or would you rather see that on pay-per-view?
I think it's good to have it on TNT, especially because Shaq does a lot of stuff with TNT anyway. So I think for the branding purposes, I think it's better to have it on that program versus a pay-per-view. I think it's good. I think it's only just begun what AEW is going to be doing.
What do you think
TV.
Shaq can do in the ring? Do you think he's going to be as good as Bad Bunny? And we'll talk about that in a second. But
I could see him doing a big boot or something or a clothesline, things like that. But, they're going to limit him. I don't think he's going to be doing that much in the ring. I think he'll be protected. I think what you're going to see is you're going to see a lot of Red Velvet and Jade Cargill. I think that's where it's going to go.
Now, as for Bad Bunny, he's training in the PC. Are you excited that he's going to be, I guess, this year's version of Rob Gronkowski? At least it looks like he's going to get a little more involved than Rob Gronkowski. But we talked about it last week. I had no idea who Bad Bunny is. And when that song hit, it's all Spanish. So I didn't realize I really don't know who Bad Bunny is.
Yeah. Let's see what he can do. I'm not that excited. I don't listen to I'm not into his music. So, if he wants to give it a go and WWE can give it a go and he looks okay, let's see. But I wouldn't put him in a big stage unless he proves himself at the PC.
Do you mind that WWE brings in a lot of, I guess, C celebrities? Like, for example, WrestleMania's got that Super Bowl look, but every year whenever they do America the Beautiful, it's always some recording artist that is literally somebody whom at WrestleMania is probably them performing in front of the biggest crowd they've ever had. Fifth Dimension, Fantasia, like it is not, other than the days that they had Aretha Franklin. I think one year they had John Legend, but it's cool. Not people that you recognize. Like Bad Bunny's a good example. That is your celebrity involvement. I remember WrestleMania 1 when you had Ali, Liberace, Cyndi Lauper, and now we're moving on to Bad Bunny.
Bad Bunny, I don't like. Again, I'm not an expert on Bad Bunny, so I'm not even going to try to act like I know much about his music or who he is and whatnot. But he does have quite a big following, not in the Latino side of the music business. But also, I think a lot of the younger kids, kids that are younger than us, do like his music. So, if it's going to bring a younger audience to WWE, if, even fans of Bad Bunny that are like, I've never watched wrestling, but you know what? If he's going to be on it, I'll check it out. Maybe there's some more fans we can grab out of it. So, and younger fans, because here's the thing. We got to keep bringing in younger fans because we got to keep the business, keep the business going.
So, a lot of people like to meme the Tom Brennan from the Cincinnati Reds giving his on-air apology last year about I think he said something negative about people. I forgot. I can't even remember. It was something negative. I think he used a homosexual slur, a homophobic slur is a better way to say it. But he said a slur and then he had to apologize for it on air while still calling the game. I think the opposite of that was Michael Cole at the Royal Rumble. I still can't believe it was just so funny. Michael Cole said the advertisement like he had to spit it out as fast as possible. Like Victoria Beer just won the Royal Rumble. It was like the number hit, and they're like, here comes Rey Mysterio, who's wearing that Victoria Secret mask, or the Victoria Beer mask. Victoria Beer, it's the official beer of Mexico. They're coming to WWE. They're one of the greatest beers you've ever had. You gotta have Victoria Beer. They're official sponsor of WWE. Thanks to Rey Mysterio bringing in Victoria Beer. And oh my God, I can't wait to have some more Victoria Beer as he's in the Royal Rumble now with Sheamus on the left. It's like, did Victoria Beer just win the Royal Rumble? Is Victoria Beer, if I was listening to the Royal Rumble, I would have thought Victoria Beer was a participant and that they were like throwing some haymakers.
And they probably paid a lot of money for that too.
But it was just like, it was a spot read like he was like reading the pinfall of the match, like the finish of the match. Like the same enthusiasm he'd give like, stunner, like pinfall, like he gave that to Victoria Beer. I just thought that was pretty awesome.
Hey, I'm okay with it. I mean, hey, that's why you keep Rey Mysterio around. You can bring a whole different product placement.
And I can't wait to see how he can add like Bad Bunny when he comes to the ring at WrestleMania, and kind of twofold what we're just talking about. When he comes to the ring, he's probably going to be like going down all the list of statistics we should be knowing about him. Like, here comes Bad Bunny to the ring, the #1 record in Mexico right now, the #2 record in South Korea. He's currently signed to this agency. He has the #1 single on iTunes, the #3 single, and he's trending worldwide on Twitter right now. And don't forget to follow him on Instagram. He's got a Snapchat, a TikTok. It's like all that stuff as he comes to the ring, right?
Sounds like a, what is it, auctioneer?
Yeah, I mean, that's what Michael Cole sounded like for Victoria Beer. And we move on to Monday Night Raw. Decent episode this week of Monday Night Raw. We learned what Drew McIntyre is going to be doing before WrestleMania, and he's going to be feuding with Sheamus. Do you like that, kind of to bide some time before WrestleMania?
Yeah, I'm okay with it.
Do you see Sheamus taking his spot in main eventing WrestleMania?
I don't see that happening, but I do think it'll make for intriguing television because, obviously we know they've been friends for 2+ decades. So I think bringing this storyline in, I think it's a good filler. The only downside is we don't get it later because you could really draw it out even longer than what. Well,
I mean, we got to get something for now. You can't have Drew McIntyre just sit on the. But you got 6 hours of pay-per-view you got to sell. He's gonna have to put the belt on at least one of those pay-per-views, I imagine, right?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense for now, but unfortunately, I would have liked to see more of Sheamus and Drew McIntyre. Maybe make it a longer feud. But I mean, for now, considering where we're at, and you got all these extra pay-per-views to fill, why not?
So from 2012 NXT and then on the main roster, do you remember Tyler Reeks?
The name sounds very familiar.
Well, his real name is Gabe Tuft, or I should say his real name was Gabe Tuft. He has made a full transition to Gabby Tuft. He's former WWE superstar now. He hasn't made any mention to getting back in the ring or any of that kind of stuff. I guess the person who is the flag bearer for that is Nyla Rose in AEW. What is your opinion on people, I guess, who have made the transition over? If you were Vince McMahon, you're Tony Khan, you got somebody like this who is huge. And if you see her now, she is not, she could give China a run for her money. So what is, if you're Vince McMahon, you're Tony Khan, what is your opinion, I guess, on bringing these people into the women's division? Do you want to just stay clear of this entirely? It's hard because you can't be discriminatory.
Of course, yeah.
But at the same time, it's very tough because of this being the way that you're building people, the way that you're building these stories, and the way that you have likewise, athletic abilities going against each other.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think it's one of those really controversial things. I know some people are one way, some people are the other way, obviously. I think for right now, and obviously you want to have open doors to everybody. I mean, that's obvious. But I think it's one of those things until we figure out what we're doing as a society. I think you should leave it by the wayside for now. I mean, I think if anything's going to happen, I would say Tony Khan would be more open to it than Vince, I feel like. And I'm not saying Vince is, a bad person by any means, but I think Tony Khan is more, I think he would do that.
See, and I feel like this would have worked better in the Attitude Era because China, for the most part, went up against men. And I feel like that was different because China was an open female and female 100%. I feel like if you did this, it might get some negativity because of the culture we live in now. And if you had her come in and go up against men, it wouldn't have the China effect, even though she's double the size of China. It wouldn't have the China effect because people would think it's discriminatory that you're putting her into this role that she essentially shouldn't have to go in. I feel like China voluntarily wanted to be in that role. China loved and because she was the 8th wonder of the world or the 9th wonder of the world, or I don't know how many real wonders there are, but they always call, like the fake one, the next one.
Yeah.
So it's like, like they call like the Empire State Building or King Kong or China the 9th wonder of the world. So 8th wonder of the world, 9th wonder of the world. I don't remember. The Houston Astrodome was one of the wonders of the world.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a legit wonder. It was more like one of the manufactured wonders.
It was. It was a great facility. I'll just say this to add to that. I just think it's one of those things that it's so controversial. Not getting into the politics side of it, but I think it's such a controversial thing. But for a lot of people, I think you just got to stay clear of it. Not that you're being discriminatory, but you're kind of walking a fine line.
Let someone else do it. And then see what happens.
Yeah.
Because, even I've seen, I did look this up and I did see a couple women men who've transitioned to women in the world of wrestling. One for sure, because some of them are not exactly sure about their transition, but one for sure, Asuka, not Asuka in WWE, but Asuka, another in Japan, made a transition. And for the most part, they have more of a Charlotte build. Like I said, Tyler Reeks has quite a huge build. So it's something to definitely look at if they did want to get back into professional wrestling. As a very tight rope to walk on what you do. So I guess
careful.
let someone else be the flag bearer. But as we end this show, I want to bring some good news. And I always kind of say this stuff in general. I personally think, even though I wasn't alive, for the most part, or paying bills in the 80s, I personally think living today overall when it is cheaper than living then. And the reason I base this off of is I look at prices for things. I look at what we have to buy today versus what you had to buy, years ago. For example, the streaming services we have nowadays versus how much money we spent on renting video games and renting movies back in the day. Those were sometimes $100 a month you spent renting movies. Now, obviously internet didn't exist then, cell phones didn't exist then, but you paid phone bills in the 80s and 90s regardless. So you had to pay. But here's a great example. I saw, if you follow me on Instagram, every day I try to post like weird advertisements I find, most of them wrestling related. But this one was for the Hulkamania VHS tape in 1988 from Coliseum Video, on sale from WWE in their catalog and at major retailers for $59.99, which equates in 2021 to $142.96. So as we're about to move into a time where you can watch Wrestlemania for $4.99 on the Peacock Network, remember, people were buying the Hulkamania VHS tape for the equivalent of today's money, $142.
That's a little rich for me. Woo, that's a lot of money.
And that's how much all the VHSs, pretty much cost at the time. And there was no, you bought it on pay-per-view, which was probably more affordable. And if you didn't tape it and you wanted to watch WrestleMania 4 after it happened, it's a pretty penny.
I used to definitely record on VHS back in the day. And like the worst part about doing it is when the tape runs out and
you got to set it to the EP.
Yeah.
You're doing the SP. You're running the tape too fast. He wanted the high quality. He wanted the what is it, 1080p now or Ultra HD now? Know. He probably wanted the 480 back then.
Yeah, the 480, and that was crystal clear back in the day. It's crazy to look like even back in like the early 2000s or mid 2000s to now. The camera, like the footage is just so much different. But back in the day, you're like, oh, this is great. This is HD. No, it's really not.
But also the prices. I mean, like we're just talking.
Yeah.
I think Sonic the Hedgehog for the Sega Genesis, my mom bought that when I was a kid for like $59.99. And that was in 1990. So again, that's about $100 for Sonic the Hedgehog in 1990, essentially. And I wondered why I couldn't get all these video games. I was like, what's going on? Why can't I get every video game on the market? Because they're ridiculously priced.
It's a little pricey.
So that's where we're going to wrap up this week's show. He's Brandon. I'm Jared. This has been the Heel the Face podcast, and we will talk to you next week.